Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you. So, reading the Rambam, reading Mishnah Torah for Hilchot Hilchot Shabbos, and the different ways of learning the Rambam. As I woke up from my pre-shear nap, right? What are some of the ways one learns Mishnah Torah? Just or how you learn Mishnah Torah? Yes, Joel, give me one way.
One way is just to learn it completely on its own, as just like one continuous book that is meant no outside sources, no thought about the fact that it's derived from anywhere, just as a single continuous piece.
Oh my, who told you should learn the Rambam that way?
Rambam.
The Rambam, right?
Yeah.
Rambam. No, you don't have to waste your time. You don't have to waste your time on other things, right? Like Gemara, etc., right? And also the Rambam, I think there was no book coming, no sequels, no counters, just like Nachum was talking about, somebody else doing civilization a different way. This is the way to do it. Anyone else? But there have been different ways. Yes, Alan.
You could read it as a Perush and the Gemara and then the Ga'an.
Okay, so Perush and the Gemara. So that was, before that was more, what the sources are, where the Rambam get it. Rambam says you don't need to learn it. I mean, so where do you get it? So that's, that's the Rishonim. The third way is just to invert it, and that's very much the Brisker way, which is how did you say it before, Alan? Say it again for me.
I said read Rambam as a Perush and the Gemara.
Right. How did he understand the Gemara? Right. How did he understand it? How does he learn it through with you? And the best way of doing that is doing the Rambam, but also, like having at least one or two other deos of deos in the Rishonim that don't learn like the Rambam, and so therefore you can play one off the other. For the years in Rabbi Soloveitchik's class share, that's what we were doing. And probably should add to that as a source, Rambam as a source of clarifying halachic ideas. And therefore, and clarify the Rambam even further. He's as clear can be, right? Hard to learn the Rambam because it's so simple. He made it simple. But once you start pulling the seams apart, that becomes a question. Any other ways of learning? Just curious. Mishnah Torah, not just the first Chelek, not just Smada, but the rest as a law book or as a pre-theological book. In other words, doesn't deal with all the issues, just because you psak halacha. And it's interesting to see another outside of Sefer Amada where the theology creeps in and you don't even necessarily notice it, is assumptions. And that's another way of learning the Rambam. Another way, of course, is as the ultimate psak halacha book. And if you're an old-time Teimani or a wannabe Teimani, that's what you learn. I knew when I was 17, in Yerushalayim, I learned for a while with a Teimani fella, a big Talmid Chacham. And he said, "Where does it come? You have to get smicha. You have to learn your Adaya." I'm like, "What? Where's that from? You don't need that. All you need is the Rambam, and or at the very least, his impact then on halacha." My interest has always been all these because that's what you have, including the first, what the Rambam, how the Rambam tells us. I'm also interested in his structure And Hilchos Shabbos is actually interesting. So you read, when I see it, I find it very interesting. On one hand, it's just like any other halachic section of the Mishnah Torah, but strikes me there's something also different there, at least in our chapters we're looking at, but all through, I think, Hilchos Shabbos, there's something else going on. And that is, he's also kind of interested in how the structure, I won't say developed, that's the wrong word for him, how the structure is to be understood. How is it to be how did it come about that we have Hilchos Shabbos in this way? Okay, so how can we do this? How can we do this? So we're going to just look at many of the halachas, see how far we get. Many of the halachas of, we'll read and we'll comment. If I can still read my notes, I wrote some of them when I was still pretty sick, so I'm having trouble reading some of them. We will do it. So let's just, no need for translation, but so as we read, I'm asking you, what's the Rambam getting at? Is there anything funny? Anything strange in the Rambam? Or that's, anyway, anything perks your interest in the Rambam? Was he getting at anything perks your interest? And I have some stuff. So, Ori, we read the Rish Aleph Aleph.
Yeah. שביתה בשביעי ממלאכה מצוות עשה, שנאמר ביום השביעי תשבות. וכל העושה בו מלאכה ביטל מצוות עשה, דבר לא תעשה, שנאמר לא תעשה כל מלאכה. ומה הוא חייב על עשיית מלאכה? אם עשה ברצונו, בזדון חייב כרת. אם היו שם עדים והתראה, נזכר. ואם עשה בשגגה, חייב קורבן חטאת קבועה.
Okay. So I'm asking my question. Just I'll ask again the first part straight. So what's the Rambam getting at?
It sounds like the essence of Shabbat is the Shvita, which, we first see in the Mitzvah Taseh. So first, I don't know if it's primary, but it is listed first. So this idea that, you should be doing Shabbat, you should be sitting
Okay,
Shabbat.
so now if he's organizing, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, because it's good how you said it. If he's organizing halacha this way of like what comes first, you gotta get these books that list all the psukim Rambam uses. So therefore that fits. However, if you kind of think that, here's this legal mind, philosophic mind, the first thing he says may very well be the principle, this is the major principle.
Mm-hmm.
Make any sense? Okay. I'm not going to be so apologetic, but it makes sense to me. But then if that's the case, we'll come back to Ori with what you were saying. But if that's the case, then there is something peculiar about this. And I'm struck to think, but here, what do you have, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, that's the first sentence, but the big focus of this first halacha is around the conditions for being chayav on the Lo Ta'aseh and what you might be chayav.
Give me a quote.
ואם עשה ברצונו בזדון חייב כרת, ואם היו שם עדים והתראה נזכר.
So this is very good what you're saying. Did I cut you off? Do you have something else to say about that? Okay. So the Maharam of Lublin, who Meir Pinei Chachamim, which is found in your standard Gemara. Your fixed up Gemara, I don't know where it is. I couldn't find it. In my old Gemaras, I could find it more easily. So, you know, he died 1616 and more or less in the Yeka area, very well used. He says something, again, he's writing on Gemara Shabbos, he's not writing on the Rambam. In fact, he's not mentioning the Rambam. He says, okay, I'm getting there. He says, there is no mitzvah to say about Shabbos. It's all mitzvah lo taseh. I'm telling you, he was a great mind. And he's still very useful for you to take a look at when you're learning, to get something to startle you. This is quite startling. I mean, all Rishonim say there's a mitzvah to say. And he says there's no mitzvah to say. Okay, if I was a better pedagogue, I'd find my old Gemara and I would have made a source sheet. But I'm an old guy, so I'm necessary. So anyway, but this is the question. And like, how can he say this? Besides from the fact that, you know, everyone slips. But let's say he's not slipping. What does it mean that he says there's no mitzvah to say? And Jessica kind of brought that up. Kind of, and you led me into saying that right now. So Ruben, what do you got?
It could be that there's not really a mitzvah aseh, because what it is to positively fulfill Shabbos is to refrain from all of the mitzvot lo taseh. That could be one way of thinking about it.
Okay, and so actually, you know, yeah, the primary focus of definition, the tzura, I would say, the form in which Shabbos is talking about, is all talking about lo taseh. Okay, right? They used to, in summer camp, you would learn those little sections about tzechira on Shabbos, small section, make kiddush, light candles, make kiddush, or to be a couple of oneg on Shabbos. Yeah, you're right. How much is that? You know, it's a couple of things. It's like a nothing. The major tzura is the lo taseh. In fact, right, and that's important in terms of this first kapitel, first halacha, this first kapitel, that when you're over a lo taseh, you're mevatel the aseh. So the lo taseh is the dominant organizing principle, the dominating culture, which means you have to stop teaching Heschel over and over and over again. Start teaching some halach, or reverse, after you've done it. He learned halacha. After you learn halacha all the time, okay, for fun, you can put that. So here you have it. So I'm throwing that out for several reasons. That when you start creating, and that's the thing I missed in terms of how I learned that. I didn't miss in terms of the Rambam. I'm interested in structure. I said I'm interested in this pre-theological work. I'm calling it pre-theology because to jump from this to the Mora is like beyond amazing, and but it's also a prompt for your own theological putting things together as a serious as serious b'nei Torah and serious potential Talmidei Chachamim, you got to see how that's going to go, and what place all the rest takes place. Yeah, what do you got?
Just to read that back into the Rambam and maybe also put a twist on it. So he immediately jumps from, if you break if you do one of the malachot, then you're breaking your bitel mitzvat aseh. You're sort of canceling the mitzvat aseh. A kind of maybe a more positive way to read what you were just saying is that, sure, it's all about the lo ta'asehs, but it's keeping all of those lo ta'asehs that gives you the access to the aseh. So even if the aseh is the main thing, in a sense, it's completely defined by the lo ta'asehs, right? It's completely defined by what you don't do.
Okay, so that means in your shul, right, you can't do for your Shabbatonim, the big emphasis only on Friday night and the swaying, etc. I'm only imagining it, but it must be somewhat accurate. And start, dealing with the halachas of the middle of the day, as it were, on Shabbos.
Yeah, and to create the atmosphere you want to create, it's all those lo ta'asehs. I think that's very much a lived experience. If you don't create the space for Shabbat, you can't do the aseh. And
okay, so that helps me. Thank you for recircling back. I want to quote something from the Yeshua Smalko. Anybody know who Yeshua Smalko is? So that Yeshua Smalko was Yisrael Yehoshua Mekutna, city in, can't remember, it's Poland or Lithuania, died in 1893, was a terrific early supporter of the Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, big posek, and maybe that's what it says in his Sefer Yeshua Smalka. He says a big difference, wants to point out about Shabbos, a big difference, see if it fits in anywhere, a big difference between Shabbos and Yeter HaMitzvahs. With Yeter HaMitzvahs, you could be a mumar, right? A mumar for that. You don't keep kosher. You're a mumar on nevelos v'trefos, or you're a mumar on basar v'cholov. A mumar is not trusted. A mumar has a problem, but it's specifically drawn to the lo ta'aseh that you are, or a series of lo ta'aseh that you're not doing. On Shabbos, a mumar l'Shabbos, a hilchos Shabbos, is considered to be a mumar l'kol haTorah kula, because Shabbos being the declaration of Chidush Olam and Yetzias Me'avdos. These are, the basic fundamental principles. And then you become a mumar l'kol Torah kula. You're an oved avodah zarah. Later on, certain poskim, and he was actually one of them, had to get over this in terms of how do you deal with people who are not observant. But nevertheless, he gives that definition. Okay, is there anything else for me to say? Or is there anything else for anybody else to say on this? I got some more stuff, I think. But does anybody else have anything? Yes, what do you have, Joseph?
So just a question, just to frame this, in the modern parlance, we might say that there's a requirement the Rambam is establishing to be intentional or mindful about your shevita, right?
Yeah.
so for example, if you just slept through all of Shabbat,
Mhm.
right? Not only would you be, and you did it just because you were exhausted, and you didn't, you would be not just missing out on Kiddush, which is the other mitzvah aseh that we sort of lump
Right.
into this.
Mhm.
You'd also you'd be mavatal this particular, this of Shvita, even though you slept the whole time, because you weren't intentionally refraining from malacha, you would perhaps be also not doing this. Kind of oddly straight, put, but why can't you just sleep through all of Shabbat? Well, if you're doing it so that you observe Shabbat, that's one thing. But if you just slip up, then you're kind of missing out.
This is, I think, an important point. As a person who dreams of doing that, I'll just sleep. You've never said that. I'm just gonna, what are you doing this Shabbos? I'm just sleeping all of Shabbos. Somehow you wake up and somehow you do the mitzvahs. But I respect that. But actually, Hilchos Shabbos, a major motif in Hilchos Shabbos is actually, even though the lo tasa per Maharam is the dominant characteristic, in understanding lo tasas, it's defined by the presence or absence of consciousness. And that's like one of the whole things that we have in the first, in this first parak and Shvi. So are you conscious of what you're doing? How is it to be conscious of what you're doing? And is it a break if you're not conscious? If you're not conscious, what kind of, a break from doing the Avera, or is it still an Avera? So therefore, it sticks into a much, I'm agreeing with you, with much wider concept. The other thing I would talk about. Anybody else? Thank you for that. Okay, I really thank you.
It did.
Yeah.
We might not want to go down this road, but it is interesting. It's you would think you would pick another pasuk, right? From the Sar de Dibra.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. What?
None of them. He could answer, as was said earlier, that it's the first appearance. Is it the first appearance? No.
No.
Yeah. Well, I would say, okay, so why didn't he? It's actually a good question. It can be answered, I think. What do you got? I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think it could be answered.
I think this is the first time the commandment is Shvita. So in Shemot 20, it says Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. And in Shemot 23 is the first time it says Tishbot. And so he's talking about Shvita as the core mitzvah.
Right. And for you radical leftists, Shvita is like a holy word, right? Strike. Okay, that's great. So, yeah, so that's the answer I was going to give. A little differently couched. As Zechira is a particular form. It could be called mindfulness. We know that we exhibit it, right? The mitzvah, Josie, is Zachor Yom HaShabbos. From that we get Kiddush, as a kiyum of the mitzvah of Zechira. By the way, how else can you be Mekayim the mitzvah of Zechira? You can make Kiddush, but there's another way of being Mekayim. Shabbos, many poskim hold Shabbat Shalom. You're Mekayim the mitzvah of Zechira every time you say that. Had a guy in life support when I was a rabbi in LA, and they were going to pull the plug, the family. And who am I? But I was a young rabbi. And they were religious, and they were, can't say they were wrong. But on the other hand, I guess I thought they were wrong at the time. Afterwards, the daughter said to me, you know, my father said to me several times, because they were there for the whole Shabbos, good Shabbos. And there was no candle lighting there was nothing there. He said, good Shabbos. He's Mekayim, Sechor Yom Shakasha. So by Mekayim, Sechor Yom Shakasha, it's not a good pasuk in itself because it's a limited, it's large, but it's limited. And in its mindfulness. But Tishbot is a what? Tishbot's what? Shvita, but say something about it, Eric.
It's an active inactive. So
Okay.
you have to find a way to actively refrain, which is different, which is in some ways more difficult from.
Okay, good. So my question is, so where's the bracha? Where's the bracha? So the Rashba says, not necessarily just on, he doesn't say it about Shabbos. He says, Rashba says, Ein bracha, the makom she'ein bo masa. So actually, for your theological thoughts, and if anybody can send me a paragraph, I'd like to have it. It's a very interesting kind of mindfulness in which I add one thing to the mindfulness. So when are you, I say you should make a bracha, but what bracha can there be? Shein bo masa. But potentially there could be a bracha, b'zein bo masa. There potentially could be, I'll say it this way. When are you Mekayim the assay of Tishbos? Joel, when are you Mekayim a mitzvah of the mitzvah of Tishbos?
I think it's at the end of the day when you haven't done anything, right? Any malacha.
So end of the day, bad time to make the bracha.
Exactly. Or you could say it's the beginning when you do your last malacha, right? You light the candles might be the last malacha you do. And then
I like that answer. I never thought of that answer. So maybe you could have a bracha there. Mm-hmm. Or you could say the hadlakas neros is not only zechira, but as a kiyum on Tishbos. I think that's good. I think it's a pilpul, but I think it's good, not anti-pilpul today. But
it could also be continuous. Like every moment you're not doing a malacha, you're like basically making the mitzvah of Tishbot.
So actually, halachically, you have to think about it in the way you're on the track, but on the wrong track. They have to change the track. That then when are you mekayim alotas?
When you're in shul and you refrain from talking business, that's when you're mekayim.
I thought that's what Shabbos was about. Okay, but I think no. And why is that? Because in shul, right? Charlie wants to speak to God, and his friend Fred wants to speak to Charlie, right? So you don't do that, right? Or you don't. What are you talk about? You talk about business. No, we just say it better. Whenever it is very tempting, truly tempting to break a lotas, and you don't, you're mekayim the lotas. And that makes sense, I think. So you put this all together, including the fact is that there's no bracha on Shabbos of Tishbot. But nonetheless, I don't know how to put it exactly together. Nonetheless, Hilchos Shabbos, the Lotas, since Tishbot is the positive, is the positive formulation of all the lotas possible. That's it. So then you have interesting consideration of what kind of mindfulness are you to have. If it's true that the lotas, is defined, the kiyum, the lotas says defined by not doing something when you do it. What do you do with all these tzaddikim who don't have the Yetzer Hara for it, They don't have the Yetzer Hara, they don't have the Yetzer for it. Or are they a new type of tzaddik which feels the Yetzer Hara very much, but still doesn't do the Avera. It's a kind of a mindfulness. One more point. So Tishbos. Are women included in the what? Jessica, what? You have to be a woman. You have to be here.
Happen to possibly be one of the only women
I
here.
know. You have to be the only woman here, I think. But what's the halachic argument that women are not chayav on Tishbos?
Well, it's definitely a time-bound positive.
That's right. It's a seisha hazman gorma, and therefore they shouldn't. So, what is a psak? Are women, as it were, exempt from Tishbos? You would say no, but why would you say no? What would be the halachic argument the other way? Since they're the halal lotas, therefore they are within the getter of the aseh, which is made up of the lotas. That's a classic formulation I'm giving to you, and a proof to this hacking I'm giving you how important the lotas is. So the lotas, right? Yes, that makes it inclusive. If I was a better pedagogue, I would read. We're packing away my mother's books, and they're going into different places. And Chana took a bunch, and we took some, and et cetera, et cetera. But so she had a fantastic library of modern Jewish literature. The Lotas says in Bellow, Malamud, and Roth, the earlier guy, Roth, the Lotas says of Shabbos, don't make how can I say it? Don't make a joyful presence. All those, not all those long, dreary days, all those things you can't do. Okay. So anyway, I think that's the deal. Yeah. So that becomes the Maharam I'm saying is right. The Maharam, that's another proof for the Maharam. The Maharam is right. The Lotas says are the major surah, and actually the major binding thing. Flip it from what I said earlier. If a Jew doesn't, all that a Jew does, the Jew is not a great Hasidic master or neo-Hasidic master. If all that a Jew does is not do the lo ta'aseh, he or she is equal to anybody else. They're there in Tishbos. Now, later on, when you get into the chapters of in the 20s of the Rambam, he says, nah, there's got to be more to it. You know, there's got to be more to it. Even though halachically, you know, tircha is mutter in Shabbos, right? I mean, because what are you doing? I mean, tircha within, you know, your Dalet Amos. You pick up a box and you move the box around, and a heavy box, you have to think this mutter, right? But, you know, but tishbos. In other words, it has to be a higher. So here's my argument to you. My argument to you is that it's important to normally, I'll say the wrong way, then I'll say the right way. Normally, what people try to do explaining Shabbos is start from the Tishbos. He himself does it. Start with the Tishbos, and then find out the Lotas. And, you know, you invite somebody over to your house for Friday night. But then if they're, you know, if they're interested, no evangelizing, but no coercion. If they're interested, they get to see the rest of the Shabbos. But actually, there's a tension buildup with the Rambam. Because if you learn through the Rambam, all these halachas, and the Rambam's great on this is because he's lucid and you can understand it. And it's not difficult stuff. You need a teacher for like you know, like Mishnah Brura. It's like really, you know, it's very, all of it's very turgid, all the Lotas says. At some point, the neshama wants something else, and you return to Tishbos. And I think that's part of the structure of the Rambam. But you can't get there until you have the Lotasa, unless you have the Lotasa. And I think that's part of his organizing principle. I can show it other places, but that's for another time. So that's that. Also, I have one more question, and that is, how do we normally, by normally I mean in our Sikha, how do we normally refer to the severity of Shabbos, this prominence and therefore severity of Shabbos laws? It's a Lotasa, right? But why, you know, why, Rambam says it here, I'm probably just saying it wrong. What manifests, you know, its great severity?
Correct.
Well, I think you're right. But normally what people will say is skila. And that's why I saw. But here, you only get skila if you do what? If you have two Adam
That's right.
who can attest to the fact and attest to what? That there was hasra, there was warning, and all the rest. But actually, it's kares. And that's what, you know, how the Rambam says it, right? If you do, you know, if you're over, it's a, is that an aleph? Am I right? Is this an aleph? He talks about kares and the rest, yes. And so how's he, and if it happens to be, so kares is the default position. But if it happens to be, somebody can attest to it, then you're really in a bad shape. So I want to say this because normally how people think or misthink, I believe, excuse me, is they'll say skila. And kares is just like, well, we can't give you skila, so you have kares. I want to say kares is the dominant position, dominant thing, except in those cases, which are not the usual cases, and we haven't performed skila for a couple of thousand years now. But kares still exists. So how, given that, if you agree with me, given that, I think what is kares as opposed to skila? You hear my thing? It's not that skill is dominant. I'm saying chorus is dominant. I'm probably, I know I'm exaggerating it, but that's what the Rambam writes. Chorus, and then it happens that it could be skilla if you evade it. Anybody have an idea? You, Jacob, you there? No? You got something? Oh, you're just moving your fingers around. Okay. Anybody have an idea?
I have a suggestion.
Good.
It's like that last thing Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to his students. He says, may you fear Hashem as much as you fear man. And they said, is that it? He said, oh, it's only you fear Hashem as much as you fear man. You know, when you're doing something wrong, you think that no man see me. You know, karet is Hashem sees you. Hashem will see you tipping the lamp. Hashem will see, and you're not going to get Olam Haba. That's karet. Stoning, stoning. You still get Olam Haba. You know.
This is
what
right.
karet is.
Right. That's good. The way I have my note, or note to myself about this, I was thinking about it, is that karet is a living hell. You know, it's actually a personal thing, or I should say, a living execution. It doesn't end. You know? Skill is less. This is, take my theological pilpul for what it is, but I actually believe this. That kares is like the worst possible thing. It's not just a one in a time event, but it's a continuous event. Skill is already a bracha, because then you can be mechaper. That's my Catholic position on chorus, because no one talks about hell as good as the Catholics, and the punishment. But we have it too. And I think that's what chorus is, and that's what chorus is. Individual, it's personal. You're cut off, and may have taken 2,000 years for the rest of the world to catch up with the notion of alienation. Alienation is the ultimate alienation, or the notion of rejection, or the notion of abandonment. And you abandon, so therefore that abandonment takes place, and therefore you also need tishbos. Now, if I were you, I'd now be thinking, are we going to do this for every halacha? And the answer is, you want chorus? You want to be cut off from me? Yes, the answer is we'll do it. But no, it's just this session is the only time we're working at it. Let's get to excuse my coffee. Asthma. You won't catch anything. Let's take a look at that. Okay. So, Jessica, you read that?
כל מקום שנאמר בהלכות שבת שהעושה דבר זה חייב, הרי זה חייב כרת. ואם היו שם עדים והתראה, חייב סגילה. ואם היה שוקק, חייב חטאת.
Okay, so we basically did it. So let's go to Gimel. Go ahead.
וכל מקום שנאמר שהעושה דבר זה פטור, הרי זה פטור מן הכרת ומן הסגילה ומן הקורבן, אבל אסור לעשות את הדבר בשבת, באיסורו מדברי סופרים, אחר כך מן המלאכה. ועושה אותה בזדון, מכין אותה מכת מוות. וכן, כל מקום שנאמר אין עושים כך וכך, או אסור לעשות כך וכך בשבת, העושה אותה דבר בזדון, מכין אותה מכת מוות.
Okay, let me ask, Makat Mardus, okay? What kind of, what's the din of Makat Mardus? Tell me something about it. You see it here, so from this limited informational base, or from something else, what do you have for Makas Mardus. Anybody?
It's a Durabanan punishment, usually of 40 lashes for one infraction.
Oh, I thought that was a lob, right? But is that also, well, Makas Mardus. Actually, Rambam elsewhere says Makas Mardus in particular is what? Makas Mardus is totally bedas based in. That's what he says. Totally bedas. So therefore, actually, the basting can go beyond 39. It's definitely a power thing. Also, it's also still it still has a kiyum for a bastin bisman hazeh. Just give it that halacha. Kiyum for a bastin bisman hazeh, even though our current rabbis do not have the old time smicha, and that has been cut off. But a bastin still is operable, can't be done by an individual. We have certain halachas in which an individual could be makom bastin. For this, an individual cannot be makom bastin. And therefore, the fact is, it runs the gamut then. A bastin could, like Bate Din in certain minhagim, on Erev Yom Kippur, right? They give you lashes, but the lashes they give, and maybe the 39, but they're with, a little silk piece, robe belt, you get your 39 makos. But here, possibility is endless in terms of that. Okay, so you get makas mardus. But with the theological or the religious, maybe not so much theological, religious lens, the whole notion of makas mardus, what I just said right now, still has a kiyum, has become ritualized. I don't know how, I actually don't know of too many, but they didn't now do that, but that's, at least Rambam's time they did do it. Later on, they did do it. It brings up a very interesting religious question. The question is, when do you have, what's the word mardus mean? Mardut. What does mardut mean? It's the striking of caused by rebellion. So how do you ensure, I think my question is, how do you ensure a religious society when you have people, breaking a law which no longer has its unified forms of judgment? Certain kind of baiting with certain kinds of judges, certain restrictions, like 39, only 39 lashes, never more. Should imagine are bad enough. But what do you do? And I think that's laid open there. Okay, good. But I wasn't, okay, so then we did that. There is something here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Isn't the Makat Mardut a halfway point or whatever to the skila, because you lose, you're stripped of citizenship. You're no longer a witness.
If you get makas mardus,
Yeah.
where does it say that?
The lashes are, you're no longer a witness. I don't remember where it says that, but
Actually,
you have that punishment.
Actually, a lot of posts can point out it doesn't make a psul freitas. that you received Makas Mardus does not make a psul freitas. Just saying, it surprised me also, but that's the halacha. I'll go back to some factor that I skipped before. Keep on going back to Aleph. Where does it say Bertsono Ubezadon? Yeah,
No.
that's an Aleph. What's Bertsono? Since we're talking about mindfulness, talking about intention, we're talking about consciousness. Look, one of the things I'm saying here is there's a lot of yin yang and stuff. So on one hand, it's lo taseh, on the other hand, it's tishbot. On one hand, you have the actual act. I'm going to find this a lot. It's the act. That's the most important way of judging. We'll get to something with that. Another way is kavanah becomes very important. So here the Rambam says, Im asa virtsono b'zadon. So virtsono means what? His will, right? As opposed to what?
Not being coerced.
What? Onus.
Not being coerced.
Right. Lafuki onus. B'zadon. Lafuke what? Zadon as opposed to
B'shogeg. But it seems a little bit superfluous, right? But isn't it just say in masab bezadon by kares with birtzonom zadon?
So,
If you're coerced, you can still be doing it on purpose.
You could also think that you could do it baratzon and not know that it's aser.
Got it.
okay, that's good. Or, yeah, no, I'll go with that. That's sufficient. So now my question is, since I've taken us to this kind of place, what other things are in the next halachas? We'll take a break soon enough. That are in the next halachas that deal with intentionality. Just review it and see what you find. What's the next one after we got up to Gimel?
Okay, we've got
Where are you? Who's
we've
speaking?
got Vav.
How about before Vav? Doesn't this talk about intentionality or not? It's a funny case of intentionality.
A Gimel as well.
Okay, what's in Gimel? Okay, so we talked about that.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So now, hey, you're saying, I'm saying to you, hey, and you're telling me, hey, what's the line? in hey?
You're doing if right there. If you're saying it's mutar, you can actually intentionally do it. Right? L'chatchila, as opposed to b'diavad, if you accidentally did it or if it happened. Right here, you have it right up front. If it's mutar, you can actually do it and say, I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to drink a glass of water.
Right.
So there's
and therefore, right. And therefore, this is very important what you're saying. These are words that are signals regarding intentionality. So, I mean, the response to intentionality. And the words, hareza mutar l'chatchila, how would you actually translate it? Chatchila is a funny term. How do you translate it? Josie, how do you translate it?
I would say, it's you're permitted to do this from the outset.
From the outset.
In other words, whatever it is you're doing, if you start doing it, whether you have the intention to do it or not intend to do it, it is still permitted to do it, as opposed to something which may only be permitted if you did it with a lapse of consciousness or a lapse of intentionality or just mistakenly.
Okay, this is very helpful, Aaron. Did you have something, Aaron? No, you didn't have. Okay. I want to continue in Hareza Mutra Chachila. What's the Rambam's assumption in this phrase, Hareza Mutra Chachila? What's his assumption of doing acts, of doing things? We say mutra l'chadchila. Hey, what do you got next?
It seems like he's assuming that any action you could be thinking about doing on Shabbat is prohibited unless
Is
you
also until
right
proved,
until proven
you're
otherwise.
guilty until proven innocent.
Right, something like that.
In those areas. Okay, I just wanted to add that. Okay, now in Hay. Okay, in Hay, I think what the Rambam doesn't say exactly is, but you know, a lot of poskim talk about it. Is what about a case? So it says, "Mahalech adam al gabe asavim b'Shabbos, v'vad shelo yiskaven la'poroso." Afikachim ne'akaru eno choshesh. What if he knows that by walking on the grass, or better, dragging the chair, dragging the chair and walking on the grass might be exactly parallel, maybe not. What does he, how does this kavanah work? I mean, I don't get it. How does a kavanah work? So you don't have kavanah to make a furrow with the chair, dragging the chair, or you have no kavanah to tear up the grass? How does it work? Yes, Aaron.
Right, between Malach and Tzricha L'Gufa and Psik Resha, there's obviously like a black and white category where something is definitely going to happen. If you cut off the head of a chicken, it will definitely die.
Yeah.
And you know, a white category, if you drag something and it's almost definitely not going to make a furrow.
Well, you drag it on
okay.
linoleum, and linoleum is not going to.
And then there's obviously going to be a gray category where at what point does, you know, if it's a 50% chance, I think it'll happen, 80, 90.
What do we call that category?
Between Psik Resha and between Malach and Tzricha L'Gufa?
No, I don't think, I think it's more Pashut. It's a case of Suffolk.
Tough.
Okay, so what if, the question that arises, what if you have a Suffolk and you just said it, and it's at 80% Suffolk? Could be 80%. Excuse me. Either way, but let's say it's 80%. You think that it's 80%. You think it's not going to happen. Yeah, what do you got, Aaron?
If it was 80% not going to happen, it'd probably be okay. It's once you get past 50% and you have a Sefek Doraita that you'd I guess then have a bigger issue.
Ruben, you got something on this?
I mean, the way I'm reading this Rambam, we're not talking about Safek. It's not even in the, it's not of your question. It's just like you're not mitkaven to do that at all. It's not like you're not sure whether or not it's going to happen. It's just not a relevant consideration.
All right. So, right.
I agree.
I think I agree with you. Yeah.
But there has to be some amount of doubt because it says efshar shetase. Like it doesn't say it will happen. It says it's possible that something will happen. So
okay, so that's on.
Right.
We got
But
that.
I would
in the
disagree
suffix.
with the 50. I think that like we don't get anything here that indicates that it's about 50%, that once it's more likely it's going to happen. It seems to be that it's about Safek versus Vadai, right? We can get into the question of how are we defining Vadai, right? That like maybe 99.5% chance that something is going to happen is considered like sufficiently high that we can treat that as if it's Vadai. But like 80%, yeah, it's more likely that the other thing is going to happen than it's not. But it seems like generally the way it's treated in the literature, if it's not a guarantee that this is going to be something that happens along with your mutter action, then it's treated as Eino Mitkaven, not Psikresha, right? You cut off the chicken's head, even though it will stagger around for a little bit, it will definitely die. Like that is actually just a guarantee, right? Whereas if you drag around a bench, it's not necessarily going to make furrows.
Right,
Yeah,
but there
so
has to
I-
be that
to-
element of Eino Mitkaven. That's the thing, right?
I didn't mean to say that at 50% then there's an issue, but even the question of what are we even talking about wouldn't even arise until there's more than a 50% chance we're talking about an Isser D'Oraita. Even if Sheino Mitkaven goes much further than 50%, it's only even in that is the only context in which this issue would even come up.
So you get a free ride if it's under 50%. I mean, that in other words, the majority of the Suffolk is only at 45% that it will happen.
Well, the
I mean,
suffix
Aaron,
of-
you get a free ride. No, I'm following up with Aaron.
I agree with Lexi that 50% is not isn't actually the distinguishing line, but even just on the most basic level, certainly if the suffix is less, yeah, I think Lexi's right that it's really a question of like possible versus almost definitely, and not
By the way, what's
how
the term?
possible.
Okay, good. What's the term for 50%? Suffix shakul. Like it's a real suffix, but it's not. It's not determined. It's a suffix, and you don't know. Okay, what's the implication of this whole? I basically agree with it, but what's the implication of this halacha of even if it's a suffix shakul, or actually less than shakul, but on this favoring that it's not going to happen, but still it's suffix chashuv. So let's say it's a suffix 40% that it will happen. What's the determination for making it usher? Is there a category that makes it usher?
Most of this halacha in the Rambam is about kavana, even
Right.
if he sets it up with the suffix as like the backdrop, but he's really reiterating that this is a side point to what you're intending to do. It's not, right? It's not I'm killing a chicken and I don't know for sure what's going to happen. It's I'm doing something completely different in terms of my intentionality, and that other thing that happens is not the focus of the act. So the suffix isn't being delved into so deeply here in this halacha, at least.
Okay. So Ruben, you have something? I see your hand. Okay. So if he was mechabein to any degree that it's fine by him if it takes place, I would argue then that kavana, even though it's only a 40% possibility that's going to happen, that kavana would make it into a chilul. We're giving great weight not only to the act, but there may be a suffix, but we're giving greater weight, as Ari keeps on telling us, that we get. No, I meant that you remind us. Excuse me. We're giving great weight to the kavana. Once the mindset is it's fine by me if it takes place, I would argue then that's kavana. He's mechabe, and that pushes over, unless it's just ridiculous. In terms of psak halacha, can you drag a chair through the dirt on Shabbos? In terms of how we paskin. Can you?
Yes.
Yes, you can. What if the chair
The
is
big
that
one or a small one?
big chair that you got from grandma? Big chair, big heavy chair, right? It's a gadol. Can you still do it? Yes, you still can do it. What happens if it's gadol shebegadolim? Can't do it because then it's a vaday, and therefore you somewhere your kavanah is present. Okay, so with your kavanah, take 5 minutes and we'll return. Oh, thank you. So let's see. Excuse me. Okay, Kol said we're looking at Zion. Kol said malacha afapisha eno tzorich l'gufa shel malacha chayav aleha. Okay, Ruben, what does that mean?
If you do something in the performance of, if you do a malacha in the performance of something else, the main sort of goal of which is not to have done that malacha, meaning you have like no need for the actual
No need
malacha that you
for the
perform.
malacha. So give me
Yeah.
an example for the Rambam's examples.
Well, the Rambam's example is if you want, like, if you extinguish a lamp because you want to save the wick or the
Yeah,
oil.
good. What's the other example? Is another example? Is that it?
I have an
Yes.
example just from elsewhere. Are you asking from this
Yeah, is
halacha
there?
specifically?
I'm just asking. Yeah, I don't remember. Maybe that's it.
There's the carrying one that there's.
Hamavir to coats.
Okay. And what? Okay. So I ask you, what does this mean? You don't. Gufa means what? It means to get the result that you want to get. You could probably do it you can do it in a mutter way. And therefore, what does it tell us about the relationship of doing the act and the tachlis, doing the lotasa, and the tachlis of what results or what could result. If it's the only way that tachlis could result in, then it's usher, right? If you say, well, but how does it's a machlokas in the Gemara, right? Malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa. You could have done it some other way. Is it mutter or aser? Why does what's the argument for saying that it's mutter? Once it's malacha she'ena tzricha l'gufa, violating the lotas, what's the argument that it's mutter? Think in terms of intention. What's the argument regarding intention? What?
The argument could be that you need kavanah to do malacha, so it's not really malacha machshavat, and therefore it's not asur.
We really don't have a particular kavanah, right? The kavanah has been weakened, and so therefore it's not usher, it's mutter. That's one side of the argument. But the Rambam paskins on the other side. I think it's Rabbi Yehuda. He paskins on the other side, which says that it's usher. Why would you say the Rambam says that it's usher? You have to put in really the words. Nonetheless, he's chayiv. None, I'm putting the words none, because that's the logic of the thing. Somebody who's helping me. Okay.
No, it's just a question of whether the like fundamental part of an action is the purpose to which it's directed, or if it's the outcome that results from it.
Okay, okay, Ruben, what do you got?
It could also be a difference in understanding of kavana. Maybe for Rabbi Yehuda, it's you have the kavana to do. You still have kavana to do the thing that is forbidden, even if it's a secondary, because the main purpose of what you're doing is not the performance of the malacha, but your consciousness is intricately involved in what you're doing.
And
So
the
maybe it's a
original,
difference.
okay, good. The original Ruben, what do you say?
I think the kavanah doesn't matter here. It's just you're actually doing the malacha. You're objectively doing it. When he said that your attention matters is when you end up doing the malacha by doing something else. But here you're doing the malacha objectively, and therefore, even if you don't have kavanah to do the malacha, it's still asur.
Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, that's good. All right. So wait. So what does that teach us about kavanah?
I would say kavanah is only relevant if you're doing the malacha in a secondary fashion. If you're objectively doing the malacha, kavanah doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So is there kavanah here?
Well,
in other words, there is kavanah here. The kavanah, you said it already, right? The kavanah is to do the act. We don't need the kavanah on the tachlis. We need kavanah on the act. That's the deal. Okay, fine. So therefore, that kavanah is an important thing. Now, let's go to, yeah.
I just want to push a little bit, if that's okay, on whether or not the Rambam thinks this is about kavanah or not.
Yeah.
And just because, I think he's just, the Gemara itself is very opaque about this dispute between Rabbi Yehuda, or the Mishnah really, or no, the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon on malacha she'eina sricha legufa, like what is it actually about, or what's going on there. And the Rambam, he puts it in the kavanah section, but he doesn't bring up really kavanah. He doesn't really define it. And the fact that even that there's two different disputes, one between about kavanah and one about malacha she'eina sricha legufa in the Gemara, makes me think that these are either two different types of kavanah or they're completely different topics. And this isn't about kavanah, it's about the method of performing the malacha and not the kavanah of performing it. So
it's about you dropped your voice at the end.
Oh, the method of
say the last.
It's about the method of performing. In other words, did I perform it in a particular way that mirrors a way of doing the malacha, or did I perform it in such a way that the object itself is part of the malacha, kind of thing, in a way that isn't about kavanah potentially. Also, I don't think it's dafka about kavanah here.
Well, when you say malacha she'eina sricha legufa, how do you understand it now?
Maybe I'm pushing the Tosfot a little bit.
No, but how are you? But how do you?
I think I'm understanding is I'm not doing it in the way that the full-blown malacha you would imagine it, right? I'm not.
No, but it says malacha she'eina sricha. I like what you're saying, but yeah, but I'm doubtful about it. It says malacha she'eina sricha legufa.
Yeah, it's like I don't need the physical output of the malacha, and therefore I'm not doing it in a way that the physical action is getting a physical output in the same way that I would in the full-blown version of the malacha, essentially.
I think you're wrong. That takes us to Perek Zion, what you happen to say. And let's talk about Perek Zion for a second, and then we can tie it together. Now we moved down to Perek Aleph, and we're in Perek Zion. Okay, so Joel, read Perek Zion Aleph.
Hold on, give me 1 second to get there. All right. Malchot shechayvim alehem skila.
Why is that Perek Zion? Hold on. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
מלאכות שחייבים עליהן סקילה וחרט
And
במזיד.
by the way, this potentially disproves what I said earlier. I
So-
said that korate is the default position, the private hell, right? And the skila is only something that is publicly attested to. But here he says, against what I said, melachot shechayim aleim skila v'karei. Of course, his second line, and it seems that skila is the major definition. Okay, that's on the side. Go on.
במזיד, or korban chata bishgaga. Mehen avot, mehen toldot. So they have primary categories and subcategories, I'd call
Okay.
it. Uminayin kol avot malachot 40 chaser echad. Uminyan kol avot malachot 40 chaser echad. So there's 39 of them. Ve'elohem.
And by the way, some people, there are poskim who don't write Arim Chaser Echad, they write Tal Malachot.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They sissing Lamitet Malachot, they say Tal. It's kind of nice. Ve'elohem.
Charisha ve'azriya ve'ksira.
Okay, stop there.
Okay.
Now, in the Mishnah, this is based on, what does it say?
Choresh ve'ha.
Zorea,
Yeah.
Kotzer. Why the disparity? Or what is the disparity? No. What is the disparity?
He's got a different verbal form he's using. One is the participle form, and this is it was called the participle noun, or I can't remember the gerund, I believe, is actually the that he's using. So
well, okay, that's because
I try something else, but I'm going to do it different.
Because you learned grammar.
Yeah, the person versus the action, I think, may be the difference in some ways.
Well, that's exactly the case.
Yeah.
So, right, difference in the brisk terminology, the difference between the poel, the doer, and the pu'ula. It's more elegant. The poel and the pu'ula. So Harish, the Rambam decides on the pu'ula as opposed to the poel. What does that tell us about the Rambam's Shita in general?
That the action is primary over the person actually doing it.
Okay, does that help you in your argument?
It does. It means that it has to be a particular.
Okay, so I gave it to you.
Yeah.
Okay, you owe me one. So
I'll take it.
Right, but say it now more explicitly what we just said. Just say
that it's to actually be chayav. It's a particular type of action. And he's saying malacha she'ein tzricha legufa. You might have thought that wasn't the right kind of action, but actually it is at the end of the day. And so the action to the Rambam is still chayav.
But you could still argue it Rav Landy's way, right? Because maybe what constitutes the action of Harisha is a particular kavana of doing that act, right? Like if I'm dragging the chair, then it's I'm not really it can't be properly said to be like furrowing the field.
And the Rambam thinks that's patur, right? Or even mutar, right? If he thinks it's mutar. What he thinks is not the issue is if, let's say, I dig a hole because I want the hole, not the dirt. There, he doesn't use that example, but that's one that's used in the Gemara, right? Then he would say that's asur, even though everyone else says it's mutar. So.
Can I just I want to put back kavana into the picture because the Rambam already said that malacha devar she'eino mitkaven is patur. So in order for malacha she'eino tzricha legufa to be chayav, it must be a thing that you are mitkaven. So what is it that it must be? So therefore, what is it that you're mitkaven? And on that, the Rambam is saying you have to be mitkaven on the action, and that's why he says over here in this halacha azriya. In other words, as long as you have kavana for the action that you're doing, then you're going to be chayiv. And what you don't need is kavana for the end result, for the item that the action produces. Like if you write, you're writing, even if you don't have the intention to create a written document, but you did write, so you're chayiv. So that's why he says that the gufa it could still be chayiv because you had kavana for the action, even if you didn't have a kavanah for the final for the final product. That's the way I see it. So then kavanah is still in the picture. That's it.
That's kavanah's in the picture for who?
In other words, you still have the require. You're still not going to be chayiv if you don't mitkaven. Question is on what do you have to mitkaven? You have to mitkaven on the action that you're doing is, that your action is in fact katsira or amir or ha'imud or adisha.
So Rav Nachum, how would you define lo mitkaven?
That you weren't trying to do when you pulled that couch. You weren't trying to do plowing. You weren't trying to plow when you pulled that couch.
So you're not trying to do the malacha, but so long as the malacha ends up happening, and you may, like as you said, like your primary focus is the action, the action of the malacha. It doesn't matter what the end result is.
It doesn't matter whether you were trying to get a plowed field or not, but it does matter whether you're trying to plow. I mean, it's hard to imagine that to differentiate the two, but the example is digging a hole. You're trying to get a pile of dirt. You're not trying to get to dig. But when you're digging, if someone asks you what you're doing, you're digging and you're trying to dig, but you're not trying to get a hole. You're still going to be high, says the Rambam.
Dirt without digging a hole. Same thing as like the candle, right? Like even if you're trying to save the oil, you can't save the oil without like turning it off, which is a malacha Shabbat.
Right. The malacha is the digging of the hole, and you're doing that malacha, and you're doing it, and you're trying to do it. You don't want the final result. You're not interested in having holes here. If you could somehow get a pile of dirt without a hole, you'd be happy. We don't care.
Okay. Any responses to Nachum?
I think the question of the connection between malacha she'eina tzricha legufa and kavanah is highly dependent on how we understand the former. According to Rashi, it feels like incredibly relevant. It's like malacha she'eina tzricha legufa feels like totally reactive to some like problem that arose in the world that I just didn't want. And I'm doing this malacha, which I really don't want to be doing in order to deal with some problem. That feels different from the Re's understanding, which is it's like just a malacha that they did in the Mishkan. There's something there. There's like this broader, that kind of feels like a more pe'uladic focus. There's like some broader cultural understanding of what constitutes a malacha. Right, that's relevant to
no, we have here a tension between kavanah and masa, and I think all the way through learning this year, you have to see right now we switched, and masa seems to dominate, but earlier on kavanah was dominating. There's a or you can say, look, you have to have a masa in order to have the kavanah and all that. But in terms of, is masa alone sufficient? That's a better way of saying it. When is masa alone sufficient? So you guys like Pesik Resha, because when there's a hechri chut, I think we should introduce that word, when there's a necessary consequence, then we say that the ma'isa has already taken place, which it does. You cut off the chicken's head, chicken flies for a moment, and then it's it falls to the ground. But I'll give you one more way of looking at it, based on what I just said. Is Pesik Resha say ma'isa is so dominant that that's sufficient, or is Pesik Resha saying to us, it's such a sure ma'isa that the kavanah is implied? You must have had kavanah. There's no way. And what do you have kavanah for? You don't want the chicken. All you want is the head because you want to give it to your kids to play with. That should upset your suburban synagogue and middle of davening on Yom Kippur. They have the chicken head there. But in other words, it's not just one or the other. Of course they're together. But what is the dominant? Aaron, what do you
Just also that even in the phrasing of like a davar shelo nitkaven elav or something like that, and malacha she'ena tzricha legufa, that there is actually a slightly different emphasis between the question of kavanah davka and tzricha legufa, insofar as we can imagine two scenarios. I'm dragging my chair, and it doesn't matter to me if it carves out a what's it called, a plow hole, a furrow. It doesn't matter to me if I'm totally indifferent, and so it's okay. Versus all else equal, if today were Thursday and I dragged my chair, I would love it to drag a furrow. But the reason I don't want it to drag a furrow is not because I don't need it, but it's because it's Shabbos. And so I'm trying to I don't want to drag a furrow specifically because it's Shabbos, in the sense that the question of my kavana is subjective, as opposed to I don't need the furrow and I'm indifferent, in which case the question of my kavana is now an objective question.
All right, this is good. This is, so therefore what? Therefore what? In terms of our understanding about, you explained the situation, but in terms of our understanding of this push and pull of kavan, of an object, maisa, maybe even a suffix maisa, and a kavana, what dominates?
Well, it's just that even when kavana dominates, the way we determine, you may not be the one who gets to determine what your kavana is on a totally subjective level.
Okay, I just want to add before I forget. I mean, I forgot because, I'm remembering Samach Gimel. I think Marsha says, but for sure, if you have no hana, then even if you had a partial kavana, it's mutter. Even though we've seen before that a partial kavana seems to be sufficient, but hana, but you have no benefit from it. So therefore, but you had the kavana to do the act. That's where the Rambam is. But anyway, so we'll say it there. I can tell you where I want to go now. I want to go to give you. I also I studied with for short when I was 17, short period of time. Rabbi Gedalia Felder from Toronto. He was based in Toronto. Very interesting guy, big time b'chach. And so I think I have notes. I can't believe it. I have notes. I don't know if they're my notes and what I thought, or his notes what he thought. So if anything there here is good, but I think this is really important. 6 Tanaim of doing malacha that are necessary to make one chayav in its performance. Okay, and we give you 6. Aleph, you have to do the complete act. Kula v'lo miksata. If you do it half, then you are potter. So the big example is akira v'hanacha. You do the akira, but you don't do the hanacha. Yes, you stand there all Shabbos until Havdalah, but you did the akira and you didn't do the hanacha, or you do the akira and you didn't bring it into the other reshut. That's probably the better way of saying it. Then that is to the shnei. You haven't done it. Or for example, right, Ketiva, Isur of Ketiva is based on 2 letters. So you took your pen and you wrote, mukso, but you wrote 1 letter and you didn't write the second letter. That's not considered to be a full act of writing. By the way, when it comes to this Rambam himself, when he talks about this, he talks about Shtei Otiot, but somewhere in what we learned, he also, I forgot exactly what kapitel it is, he says, if you break it, if you're, in terms of the amount that you're writing, you have to do it you do it kula, right? So I gave the two OTO. He said, what if you're writing a star, and you stop in the middle of writing the star, nonetheless you're chai because you have the two OTO, but you would have the havamina that if you didn't write the last line of the star, you're not chayiv. Maybe chayiv d'Rabbanan, but you're not chayiv d'Oraisa. But he says star ve'igeret. So the question is, if he says star already, then the less is usher. Why does he say I have to add igeret? A letter. Because the star has a specific formulation. And if you don't finish, right, Ruben Perez, the star, if you don't write that last line in the star, you'd bring up in court, so the star is not applicable anymore. It's never been applicable because you forgot 3 lines or 1 line or that, right? Okay. But with an Igeris, you can stop an Igeris anywhere. It's still, so you think that with an Igeris, maybe, but nonetheless, the 2 letters apply. But in general, again, to say Aleph, is you have to do it to be chayv, you have to do it kula v'lo miksata in terms of the definition of what for any particular malacha from the Tal malachot, from the Lamatet malachot, the Tal malachot. Each one has its own definition of what is a complete act. And if you don't do the complete act, then you're not chayv, dear Isa. Okay. Second, we just went to a long conversation about it. Malacha tzricha l'gufa. To make, according to all the deot, if the malacha is needed for its own act, therefore, you want to be mechabe the or, you want to extinguish the light because you want it to be dark, and therefore you are a saucer. Right? You'd be potter. And therefore, the example you just gave before about the holes and all that, I don't have to go any further. The third thing, which will disrupt your being chai, will disrupt being chayav, is shinui, right? Sheino mischayev is my note. Sheino mischayev al hamalacha el b'derech haragil, and it has to be done in the normal fashion. Kagon tiviyah. Tiviyah is malacha of how would you translate it? Braiding. How would you translate it? Tiviyah of a tet. Nachum, how do you translate it? Okay. Anybody? Okay, braiding hairs. So, kagon tiviyah, which is a av malacha, but you have to do it. But if you braid it in tava from a behema chaya, you're potter because no one braids from a behema chaya. I think there's other reasons for there, but anyway, that's in Shabbos Ayin Dalet. Let's do another case. A motzi masa rosha. You take the thing you're carrying from one reshut to the other, and you put it on your head, and you take it from one to the other. There are people that do that. Some of the Rishonim ask. No, it's one. Excuse me. Maharam Shek asks. Somebody does it. However, ain derech masa. That's not the way people carry. What about if you go to countries that evidently the Maharam Shek wasn't part of? I think that might be that Metzius would probably change the halacha. All right, so therefore, just to repeat, the Ran says, it's based on the Ran, the ain derech hotza'ah b'kach, and therefore the derech, the pu'ulah has to be a normal pu'ulah, and any sort of shinui will get you out of it. By the way, getting to that shinui is not so simple. It's sometimes overused. I brought a big Talmid Chacham back to our house one Shabbos, and Rabbi Isaac, who was all of the 5, we come into the house on Shabbos. The TV was on, the lights were blinkering, dishwasher was on, it wasn't supposed to be on. And I expressed surprise, and he says to the Talmid Chacham, he says, he said, this is my shinui stick. With this stick, I can do everything. I was a little kid. So that wasn't based on Lumdus, was based on the chatoim of his father who needed his son before Das to do something. So I learned my lesson. Now, number 4. We didn't talk about, so now we should talk about mitasek potter, right? So what's the, so you help me here. What's the dynamics of a mitasek that renders it potter? The act, the forbidden act potter. What is mitasek?
Not malachat machshavet. Definitionally, it's sort of like absent-minded, right? As opposed to some of our other things, which are about, oh, you didn't have kavana for the forbidden thing, right? Or you had kavana to do the forbidden thing, but not for purpose. Or you intended to do this, but you didn't know it was aser. Mitasek is like you're absent-mindedly picking grass, right? It's definitionally something. It's definitionally b'di'evet, because it's all about like you're just not really thinking, right? Like you're not behaving in an intentional, thought out way. It's just, absent-minded, I think is probably the best way to put it.
So I think that's that's what I was asking for. But I'm also asking for it in the sense, and thank you, because you said the magic words. Malachat machshavet, right? The perfect act, the act has to be completely usher. Can't be with shinui, for example, we just said, right? The act has to be fully usher, it has to be a normal act. I mean, all that. And how people do things. And at the same time, you have to have the kavanah. So if you're drawing lines on a piece of paper, or you're doing you're doodling, or you're doing 2 letters, I'm not sure about doodles. Right, you're doing the 2 letters absentmindedly, or you're doodling. Doodling is probably a good example. You're doodling, you are mitasek. That's something that you don't do as melechet machshavet. So all the way through, we're going to be encountering melechet machshavet. Number 5. Hey, miskalkel, mitkalkel. You potter. Why are you potter? And mikalkel.
Doesn't this have to do with because it relates to stuff for work in the Mishkan, it has to be a deductive act that was contributing something and not just ruining things.
We need a better, I think you're exactly right, except I like a better word than contributing.
It's not work, maybe.
How will we say?
It's not productive.
Okay. Right, kilkul.
It's not a
And
tikkun.
therefore, it says that all the
Mhm.
isurim are based on, it's a very important concept. All the isurim are based on the 6 days of the week. And we're supposed to work and be productive and contribute to life. But from a kalka, but it has to be a complete kilkul. What can disrupt kilkul and disrupt being chayav? That's the question.
Do you mean what are ways you can be chayav for a destructive action?
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's not exactly constructive or productive because there's definitely destructive acts that are not kilkul because they help you. You can do a destructive act that still helps you. Kilkul means it just doesn't help.
Who's speaking?
Ori.
Ori. So I agree. I'll just say it this way: is it kilkul? If you do kilkul, al manat l'takein, that the kilkul leads to a tikkun. Then it's not it's a tikkun and not a kilkul. So you want this area open, and so you tear through the grass and you tear through the brush to give yourself a picnic spot. Excuse me. That was a kilkul, but it was almanas l'takein. Or the Rambam has it here. You have you raise a house. Almanat livnot bimkomo. That's not real kilkul and a saucer. By the way, almanat livnot bimkomo. Did you see that in the Rambam? I know I have from somewhere. I think it's in the Rambam here. In other words, that particular language.
It's at the end of Perek Aleph.
And the paragraph. So read it to us.
Kol hamekalkel al manat lataken chayav. Kitzad, harei shesatar kedei livnot bimkomo, o shemachak kedei lechtov bimkom shemachak, o chafar guma kedei livnot betocha yesodot, v'chol kayotze vazeh chayav, v'shiro kishior hamataken.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Now, what does he mean, bimkom? Read that half a phrase again that you read. You read the full thing.
Harei shesatar kedei livnot bimkomo.
Okay. What does bimkomo mean?
Could be in the same exact place, just
right
on top.
Or you tear down the business building so you can build somewhere else. That would also be considered bimkomo in terms of the halacha. So whenever there's
instead of, bimkomo can be instead of as opposed to in its place.
Good. I wasn't thinking that direction. Aaron?
Oh, I think here it really is like in its place, because if you're doing, if you're being soter something and has no relation to the thing you're building, that's a different question of being soter something and then building in its literal place.
Well, you could be using the stones of that building to build the other building.
Also true.
So it's that was number no.
That was 5.
That was 5. What I want to say about that is, so there's another subtext going through all this is how the shulam, that's not the term used here, but I can't think of any term. How Meshulam does your kavanah have to be? In other words, to be chayav. How Meshulam does the act have to be in order to be chayav? And what is a real disruption and what is not a disruption in terms of those two things? Is it enough to have, and especially when it's combined with something else, another principle like psik ratio. If you, it's the Misa, but just any kid knows the chicken dies. Everyone knows that. So there is some residual kavanah there. And so anyway, in terms of the mushlam, that becomes both for kavanah and being even though it's a minimal, but it's a real kavanah. Minimal is sufficient. And same thing with the act. The act could be minimal, but as long as that it is a full act, as opposed to being only a partial act. So fullness and completeness will be very important in defining our Tal Malachot. And the last one that I have, Kol Malacha She, this is how I wrote it. Yeah. Kol Malacha She'ein La Kiyum Pater. It has to last. It decide how long it lasts. So, but I need an example. Malacha seemed to be a malacha.
Drawing letters in the sand.
I think it's a perfect example. I would be machmer and say, just try, just put in one letter. So, just put in the H for help, when you're on a deserted island and you see the plane coming. No, but I think actually it is. I mean, but it would be in a sandy, right, as you're defining, be in a sandy area, which in a short period of time, it has no kiyum, or even defined, it has no kiyum. That's a good example. And that's a good example of talking about the facticity of the Misa. The Misa, the Ein La Kiyum, in a certain sense, it doesn't exist. If that's the case, why not using a lighter or something, striking a match? Why isn't that mutter on some level? Because it's not supposed to last any longer. Its kiyum is for that second or 3 seconds, and therefore it's considered to be a full activity. Okay.
So by the same logic, like writing with invisible ink would be the same thing. Disappearing ink would be the same thing.
Well, actually, that's the source of the heter in the few religious hospitals for doctors to make notes. Ladino Hospital, Ladino, something like that. It's not Ladino, it's Ladino or something. Hospital near Netanya, which was founded by the Ladino Rabbi. He lost his entire family in the Shoah, and he only survived. And he built a hospital. I think it's still around. It was a good hospital, and he had doctors make notes with disappearing ink, and therefore it was mutter. I mean, it had the heter pikuach nefesh and all that, but heter pikuach nefesh is a heter that sometimes is used in general in a very strange way. There was a little league team that some of my Balabatim wanted their kids to be part of that met primarily at Shabbos. And 2 of them said to me, parents, when I thought there was, I said it was awesome for various reasons. And they said, but it's pikuach nefesh. And they meant it. I'm like, what do you do with that? And then I said, pikuach nefesh for your middle class life didn't go over well. But in any event, so let me say one last thing. I want to say one last thing because I thought about this, some of the notions we were talking about today. If I can find it. Okay. Well, the whole wide other area that we didn't discuss, I think we hit a lot of areas, is the areas of where are the malachot derived from. And just to, yeah, 1 minute, I can do it in 1 minute. And even within the Rambam, there seems to be what Chazal was able to figure out as one thing, and they were somech on the laws of the Mishkan, or the examples of the, not laws, but the example of the Mishkan. And we say example of Mishkan, we mean the erection of the Mishkan and taking it apart, not the korbanos necessarily. All those acts gave us that definition, and that's stuff you've learned, and you know that, and that also comes from the smichat parshiot of Hilchot Shabbos and the Mishkan. So therefore, the Mishkan, as the most creative act that the rabbis could think of, became the definitional act, became the definition of the Gedarim and the definitions of Molacha, and it led us to 39. But the other opinion is, and talks about all these Malachot came from, I think it came down on Sinai, and Chazal only attached them to the Mishkan, but here's part of the deal, not necessarily all the malachot, and therefore one needs to figure out where that goes. But in terms of the superstructure, that takes us all the way back to Tishbot. So let me end the share where we began. Maybe Tishbot was a driving, if you say that the rabbis aligned their derivation from the Torah, from the derivation from the Torah, what they did was they were masmich these malachot to what was done in the Mishkan. Didn't the Mishkan come first, as it were? The Mishkan came later in the sense of being the source. And then where did it come from? The creation of this, and you'll be able to say this better for me, in terms of where's the source of this whole structure. And I say the source of the whole structure is Tishbot. And then you say, maybe Tishbot really is primary. How do you create a society? How do you have a restful society in Shabbos? And I say that with also the notion that I think, Shabbos is like one of the things we do right. I don't know if it's the only one. It just came through Avelut. I think Avelut is, got 11 and a half more months to go through, but at least this part of Avelut I've been through. Avelut may be another one of them. But how do you create these structures? And I want to say that, of course, Tishbot, it's obvious. I fought it the other way because I still think there's something to learn from it. To say Lo Ta'aseh is the major tzura of what we're talking about. In other words, that explains the Maram Melublin. That explains them. But on the other hand, the notion that the rabbis, this is as close as you can get from a traditional perspective to saying that rabbis just made it up. But the fact that the inspiration comes from Tishbot is, and therefore needs to be carried out by a Lo Ta'aseh, I think that's a good thing to think about. Anyway, very nice to be back with you. Thank you very much. And next week is Reb Nachum. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Rav Landis.
Actually, yeah.
Well, I have a go. Sorry, Rav Nachum. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I think, but next week will be, I think, Aaron and Alan.
Oh, nice.